So it is 5:03 and I'm calling this meeting to order. First, a reminder that meetings of the select board are meetings conducted in public. They are not meetings of the public. Nonetheless, members of the public shall be afforded reasonable opportunities to express opinions about matters conducted by the select board so long as order is maintained. The rules for public comment are at the conclusion of a select board discussion on an agenda item, but before any action is taken, there may be 10 minutes afforded to public comment. Comments made by the public must be addressed to the chair, to the select board as a whole, and not to any individual members of the select board or members of the public. Members of the public must be acknowledged by the chair before speaking. If a member of the public has already spoken on a topic, they shall not be recognized again until others have first been given the opportunity to comment. Order and decorum shall be maintained throughout the meeting. Personal, impertinent, threatening, or profane remarks will not be tolerated. For those who are participating via Zoom, please note that chat is not an appropriate avenue for public comment. All public comments must be made verbally when acknowledged by the chair. Please silence all cell phones, and a reminder to all that this meeting is being recorded and may appear on the internet. So first are the adjustments to the order of the agenda.
I have one.
Okay.
I would like to strike 3A3, Assistant Fire Chief Job Description.
Okay. So any other adjustments?
Is there a time when we can make comments as board members? Just
So is it on topic?
I was going to talk about the plans for the next moon launch. No, I wanted to talk about the chief's job description.
Okay, so yeah, so why don't we do that right now as soon as I can listen to that discussion, okay?
Okay.
Moving on to select board unfinished business, which is the Putney Fire Department. You want to say something, Fletcher?
Thank you. I've been talking to a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, and I'm troubled by the recent direction of the fire department. And I haven't been in town that long, but long enough to start forming opinions, I guess. Recently, Billy Strauss addressed the select board and I'd say admonished us to respect the chain of command and work through the chain of command when dealing with the fire department. Then when Acting Chief Martin took over, he changed the access codes to the building. And he didn't give the town manager the codes. I don't know, do you have them now?
I have them now.
Okay, it took multiple requests to get them. That should have happened immediately. And it seemed to me that what that bespoke was there's a chain of command in one respect and there's not a chain of command in another. This building belongs to the town of Putney. The select board is responsible for overseeing property belonging to the town. The town manager is our agent in doing that. And by statute, the town manager is also the supervisor of the fire department itself. So effectively, the town manager is the fire chief's superior officer. So by locking her out of the building and not giving her the access codes, the fire chief was acting with disdain for the chain of command rather than respecting it. Now you've got in front of you the proposed job description that Evan produced. And part of it really caught my attention, the part titled Supervision Received. It says, receives supervision directly from the town manager while making independent judgment. Basically, the exception eats up the rule. Effectively, what this description would do is place the fire chief outside of supervision by the town manager. It's his judgment whether he wants to take her advice or not. That's not how things are supposed to work. In fact, it's contrary to probably half a dozen different statutes that I could point out. it effectively would insulate the fire chief from accountability to the town. And when I read it, I thought that it's another step toward establishing the fire department as an independent fiefdom within the town. And based on my conversations with people, it felt like that's the continuation of a process that's been going on for quite a while, some years, I would say. As I say, I've spoken to a number of people, many of whom have in the past been involved with the fire department as volunteers and who don't feel particularly welcome here now. And I think that's a really serious problem in a small town with a volunteer fire department. I believe we have to change that. We need to be reaching out to volunteers, not driving them away. As I went over the proposed job description, and after the conversation that we all had here last night going over it with a number of people who are way more knowledgeable than me, it seemed to me that there's a great deal in the description that is loaded into sort of duties of the chief that could be being handled by volunteers with the right leadership. I think now, as we basically embark on another what could be lengthy tenure of a new fire chief, now's the time to change things if we think they need to change. Personally, I would like to see, rather than just forging ahead, and I know this thing feels like it's already got momentum, I would rather see us step back, consider finding an interim chief who could manage things for up to a year while we think about the structure of the fire department and what we want from its leadership, so that we can then seek a fire chief who can give us that instead of just running pell-mell into the lengthy description we have in front of us. Frankly, I'm not even sure right now that we need a full-time chief. I mean, what we need is somebody who can really inspire volunteers, get people in here, get people participating in the fire department, and again, in a way that they haven't really been doing in the recent past. That's a thing that many people have noted, that we're not getting enough people turning out. I don't think it's just because everybody got lazy. I think people aren't feeling the same way about the fire department that they did 10 or 15 years ago. And I think now's the time to step back and think about those things and consider the direction. So I don't know where I would go with the description. I mean, there's a whole lot of things on here, all of which need to be done. I'm just not sure they all need to be done by the chief. Maybe a chief the right chief could get the right volunteers to do a lot of it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks. So, one second. Jeanette did want to make a statement as well. But before I do that, is there anybody else who wants to make an opening?
I would second what Fletcher said, absolutely. There needs to be a change in leadership in this department to bring people in that have fallen, by the wayside and don't feel welcome here.
Okay. Jeanette, go ahead.
Thank you. Jeanette White. I don't, my apologies for bringing this up now. It's probably a little late. I should have spoken last week, but the room seemed a bit charged at that time and I did not. So here's what I should have said around the discussion of the formation of what was called the interview committee at that time. Hiring a permanent chief is an important step, but neither a job description can be written nor someone hired until there is some consensus on the future of the department. This is a little bit different than what I think Fletcher was saying. Even writing a job description can't be done until there is some agreement. A few examples will it be a full-time or part-time? Will it incorporate some of the other duties that Chief Goddard was doing? Will there be paid staff, and will they be town employees? How will the department collaborate with the other departments in town? There's current leadership at the department. You can argue whether you like that leadership or not, but there is an interim chief and there is leadership here. While it may not be ideal, I believe Evan could serve as interim for 3 to 6 months, or even longer perhaps, while the department and the larger community answer all these questions and more. Writing a job description and hiring a chief now is a bit like putting the proverbial cart before the horse. I realize this is a bit late in the process, and for that I apologize. My understanding after the release of the Triton report was that there would be a process to help define the future of the department. Chief Goddard's resignation threw a temporary monkey wrench in that process, but I do believe it was temporary. There is now assigned leadership roles. Things seem to have settled down, and I suggest we now return to that process. And I'm not suggesting hiring a consultant to do any kind of a strategic plan, but instead have someone, perhaps someone like Dave Emery, who garners a lot of respect, facilitate a process with the department, the town government, and the larger community. The Planning Commission spent many hours working with the community around the town plan. The future of our fire department is equally important and deserves more time and a process. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna forget people's names, I'm sorry, I should know your name too. Could you?
I'm Leonard Howard, I live in town here. I'm sure most of you know what I do, and I don't need to say what I do. But I thought long and hard before I came to this meeting, because I respect what these people do. I was young like them once, thought I knew everything, knew nothing. And unfortunately, that's the position you folks are in. You can get mad at me whether you disagree with me or not, and I agree with what Jeanette said, and I agree with what Fletcher said. We're at a point here, AP Triton came in and did a report, and we're at a situation here where it's quite scary, to be quite honest with you. And again, no disrespect. Evan's the interim chief. I agree with Fletcher. We need to slow down. Because, yes, we have people that can come in and put the suits on and get in the fire truck and run out the door. But unfortunately, when they get there, they don't know what to do. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm afraid somebody's gonna get hurt or killed. So we need to back up here. And I agree with, there needs to be a committee, and you've got quite a few people sitting in this room are quite capable of sitting on a board and evaluating what's wrong here and what's right here and how to help move forward. And that made me, this ain't gonna be a popular thing that I say, but a town south of where I'm the fire chief had to shut down for the same reasons. And is that maybe what we need to do? Maybe that's what we need to do. And I would encourage Evan to reach out to all the area chiefs, to touch base with them, to talk about that, how we can move forward. Because right now, we got people going out in vehicles that I don't think should be going out in the vehicles, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. They just haven't had the proper training and experience to do so. So I think you folks need to really evaluate the AP Triton report, because when Rich came and gave his presentation, Rich was nice. Rich was professional and nice. I'm being professional, but it's a serious situation here. And we're dealing with people's lives, and I don't want the townspeople to have a false sense of security. Because when people call for help, they want help. And the people that come to give the help need to know how to provide the help. And do I think these people here are capable of doing that? Most certainly, once they're trained and up to the point where they need to be, but I don't think we're there now. And I think you people as a select board need to make a hard decision on developing a committee to sit down with Evan and some of the leadership of the department, figure out how we can get there. But right now, we're not there. And I hope people don't take it the wrong way, but I think people need to understand that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there, before I move on to comments, is there discussion among the board?
I'd just like to say, the night the Star Hotel burned, I was standing in the square in Bellows Falls. Dick Brown was my insurance agent. He came to talk to me a couple months after that. I want to tell you, that's a conversation I never want to have again. You know, I never want to send somebody out who isn't equipped well enough or trained well enough. 2 guys didn't come out of that building that night. I never want to see that happen again.
Rory?
Yeah, Rory Dubs, I'm an active member on the Putney Fire Department. I've been on the department for just over 5 years now, and in that time I have accumulated countless hours of training, including my Firefighter 1 cert, my AEMT certification, and numerous other certifications. In that time, I actually think the department has moved forward in many regards, and I hope I speak for some of the people here, as well as other members of the department who I know regularly show up as members who routinely go on calls. None of us were certainly talked to about the current state of the department. And it's a little disheartening hearing that you've spoken to all these people, but certainly no one who shows up and does the job has been spoken to. So it seems like you're only getting one side of the picture. And I would like to publicly state that any action by Eric McGowan in this process, I am utterly against. Him leaving the fire department and the circumstances under which he left the fire department should automatically exclude him from any involvement. And his opinion should be taken with a massive grain of salt.
I would appreciate it if we didn't engage in personalities here, please.
Okay, let's not have a back and forth, please. Thanks for your comments. Are there other comments in the room?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah.
I've heard mention of the Triton report, which I'm assuming is a study that happened of the fire department. My question is, if the town spent the money, townspeople money to have this report done, then why are people not willing to slow down this process, to dive into that report and to take a good hard look at to how this is set up? And maybe network with fire departments across the nation who are going through this struggle themselves and see, what their processes are. I agree. This is the time to slow everything down. Look at that report, look at the results, and look to the future. A paid fire chief in a town is fine, but the financial struggles of people nowadays is a reality that everybody is facing. Property taxes are only going to go up. What's your return on that paid fire chief? Are you billing for services where you can get money back to offset some of the costs for that fire chief? It's a really good time to take a hard look as to what is going on here and reassess. This is now a non-manufacturing town. This is a residential college town. The demographics in this challenge has changed when Putney Paper closed. With that, I think town services need to change and take a good hard look.
That's a good point. Billy?
Bruce Strauss. I wasn't really planning to say anything tonight, to be honest. I was feeling happy that our process was starting to move forward. And in the last 7 minutes, I'm almost to a point where I don't even know where to start. I'm so upset by some of what I'm hearing here. Nobody asked the chief to resign. Nobody expected the chief to resign. The chief resigned. That left us in a situation as a town where we just needed to plot our way forward. In triage, we talk about start where you stand. We started with the fact that all of a sudden we didn't have a chief who'd been here for 22 years. What we do going forward from here and how quickly we do it is all on the table. Nobody is saying that we have to do this in a week or in a month or in 2 months. There's no rush. So this is kind of a false flag, if you will, that's being a little bit used, I have felt tonight, actually to bash the people that are here and are showing up. and I don't have the numbers, but Evan probably knows how many calls have been run, or Karen, you probably know, since the day the chief resigned, like 9 days ago. How many calls have we run?
You guys had 17 just last week.
Okay, so just so, in case anyone on the board doesn't know, 17 alarms have gone out since Chief Goddard resigned. And 17 times, to my knowledge, the people in this building have done their best to do what they've been doing for a month and a year and a decade and 2 decades and half a century and more. They came down, they responded at their level to the best of their abilities within their qualifications. Was every call run perfect? I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't answer that. And probably not. Very few calls are perfect. Emergency calls by their nature are unpredictable. And what we train for is managing what we see on the calls as best we can in the moment. To my knowledge, no houses burned to the ground last week and nobody died that wasn't gonna die anyway. And you can correct me if I missed something. So what is going on here now is what has always gone on here. So that is number one. And I respectfully very much disagree with Len. I mean, nothing has changed in terms of the training level and the level of ability in this department in the last week or in the last month or frankly in the last 6 months. And may there be shortcomings? May there be places where training could be better? Sure. It's a quasi-volunteer department in a tiny rural town. Is the Triton report valid in many of the conclusions? I think yes, and I think probably everybody that's associated with this department would agree. That report exposed a lot of really important, valuable topics, areas for improvement. I don't think there's any disagreement about that. So that's sort of a point number 2, I suppose, is let's just get that on the table. That nobody in the department has a big issue with the Triton report. It was a good report. They did a good job. There's stuff that we can work on, and we will work on, and we've started to work on. So it's a non-issue in that sense. The timing of how we address those fixes is on the table. And it's going to be a function of town resources, it's going to be a function of town hall resources, which includes you and includes the select board, and it's going to be a function probably of some budget resources and a process, I guess, of rethinking going forward from here how we address emergency services in this town. But I know for a fact that people on this department are trained well. I mean, we did not win Vermont Emergency Service of the Year in 2023, I think it was 23, which is a pretty recent commendation, because we didn't know what the heck we were doing. I mean, that's not how that works. So respectfully disagreeing with Len, but also acknowledging, yes, there are areas for improvement. And I'm sure any of the responders that are here and people who have been called out for their excellent service, life-saving service, would agree. So nobody is saying we're perfect. So I wanted to put that out there. And then I guess going back a little bit to what Fletcher said, there is no rush. The rush was just continuity of coverage. That was the only rush. And you used the word admonish, and I didn't mean to admonish anybody. I was simply saying we have a responsibility to do our best to assure continuity of coverage, continuity of leadership, and that was a rush. And we did drag our feet on that, and we've covered that. That's like done and dusted. We don't need to go back over that. And here we are now. We have an interim chief, thanks to the fact that Evan Martin was willing to step forward. I don't think this is a job he particularly wants, and it's certainly not a job he wants for the long haul. So he's...
I'm gonna give you another minute.
Okay, so he's here until we figure out what the next step is. And I will just close by saying it's not a rush. There's nobody here saying it's a rush. And I completely agree that the job description should be something that we take our time with. And however long it takes, and it was my understanding, frankly, that this committee's charge was in part going to be to mold this job description. So I'm not sure, if this is a draft, that's fine, but I'm not sure that we need to take up select board time and community time wordsmithing a job description that is at the very beginning of the process. Nobody's proposing this, I don't think, as a final job description. And if-
Okay, so as I understand that there was some disagreement about what the committee was going to be doing. And there were some people who didn't want to serve on a committee if they were going to have to come up with a job description. So there was some work behind the scenes to come up with a job description. I also want to say that this is a hard conversation among all of us, and I would hope that people don't take things so personally when we're talking about hard discussions, because we all are trying to get this department move forward in this department, not to disrespect what you have done in the past. You have all served tirelessly on this department. Winning an award is an amazing accomplishment, but we also need to move forward into the 2024, 2020s as a department, because things have changed, things have modernized. We're not necessarily up to speed in that regard. And I also think that you all are actually agreeing with each other that we don't necessarily need to rush into this process, that there's some pieces and parts here that are not necessarily fleshed out. I don't know what Evan's time frame is. I heard that he didn't want to stay in this position all that long, so that is a factor. So it may be that we find an interim. A long-term interim, I don't know what you call that. But I agree with you. This is not set in stone. The hiring committee hasn't even been created yet. We can basically craft whatever we want. So just so everybody's on the same page. Karen, did you have something?
I just want to clarify. So it is the select board's role to approve job descriptions, and because the fire department is a specialty, and I don't have any experience. So this was drafted up last night. And I still feel that a deputy fire chief or an assistant fire chief job description should be also created. And depending on how we move forward with the department, it's going to be very important for the community and the department, select board, and myself to collaborate and communicate with one another to figure this out. So, so I'm gonna go back to the board, because before anything can happen, and I think you're right, waiting on the interview committee for right now is good. I'm concerned that, Evan is the interim right now, but, it's a question that needs to be asked, and, how long is he willing to sit in that position? And I think we have to be respectful of, the time as well. And I don't know if a year makes sense, Billy. I don't know.
Well, I think this speaks to the way that we're kind of backing ourselves into a process that we don't know. This is not normally how we create committees. First, we come up with the purpose of the committee, and then we find the committee members. And it seems to me that we're finding the committee members and trying to decide what the purpose of the committee is, and that's a little backwards to me. So what's your feeling?
Yeah, the other thing that I feel is confusing is where we're putting the AP Triton report in relationship to how we're making decisions about what we need in terms of captain, in terms of hierarchy here in the fire department. Mm-hmm. So I'm just not clear whether we can do one without the other, whether we need to do them jointly. I would be really open to suggestions about that. Yeah.
I would feel, just to
Go ahead.
follow up on, I would feel that if we were able to have an interim chief for a year, that that would give us time to suss out the important parts of the AP Triton report, and from that write, a permanent job description for a fire chief and assistant fire chief, as opposed to trying to pick it out in the middle of the process.
Which, that makes sense to me.
But I still feel that it's not something that the board is gonna necessarily take on by ourselves. I still think that a committee of some kind should be part of that process, or be responsible for that process even. That's my feeling, because.
Right, but that's a completely different committee
Yeah.
than the hiring
Right.
committee for the chief.
Mhm.
So, I think that first things first, we do need to check in with them, and I don't think this is the place to
No.
do it.
Right.
But that needs to be done so that we know what we're working with and, what the parameters are there. Because that will make a big difference in what we're doing next.
Pam, did you have something?
I do, I have a couple of questions. You just made reference, Karen, to another job description for an assistant chief. Are you talking of adding another paid position to this department?
No, it's not, no.
And is there any talk of cutting the fire chief's position down at all?
That was a possibility. We don't know enough, that's what I'm saying, is I don't think we know enough here to really decide that this description that's in front of us is the right description going forward.
That's why I think everybody needs to slow down
Yeah.
and absorb that Triton report, the recommendations.
Right.
Sure.
So I wanted to state, the Triton report is gonna help us with a succession plan. So, the chief, the fire and deputy, and so we wouldn't be in this situation now. But, what was I gonna say? So my question is, and with some of the folks here from the fire department, I've gone back and forth, and I do have an RFP to put out there, to get a third party to help us with a strategic plan, but I've spoken to the select board a little bit. Does it make sense to start it now, or does it make sense to have a permanent fire chief so they can go through the process as well? Those are questions that we need to ask ourselves, I think the AP Triton report is important. There's a lot of stuff in there, like Billy said, we're already doing it, but there's stuff that we're gonna need help with. It's about $18,000 to do that strategic plan. Do we do it internally, in the fire department? I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge to, I'm learning myself, but I don't have enough
All right.
to have answers.
Thanks, Karen. I just wanted to say that perhaps we approach the AP Triton report not as a whole, but we carve out the parts that are particular to staffing, things that would be particular to our conversation about the chief and the hiring and those parts, that there's lots in the AP Triton report. We don't have to bite it all off at one time.
Right.
So, I would think we could perhaps get a committee started that would take a chunk of, a piece of the AP Triton report, even before we have external support for that, and start using that report and that committee to move us along.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. So I have some people in the back who haven't spoken yet. Who's that there? Sorry.
Brian.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that you kind of need to go back to basics. Some of the stuff that maybe is getting worried about is important stuff with the fire department, but you have a problem with getting people to show up. And I think you need to get somebody that wants to be in charge, that can stop the back and forth between, I mean, they're pretty obvious that there's a couple of groups and they're, you know, kind of going back and forth at each other. You know, that needs to stop. You need to get it to stop, and people need to quit looking out the rearview mirror at what's going on back and what happened. It's water over the dam. Look forward. And anybody that truly cares about this fire department is gonna look forward to try to make it better, not look backwards. So everybody needs to just cut it out and go to work and get the job done. Put your head down, show up when the pager goes off, if you can. Get your job done and go home. And within a pretty short amount of time, if you can get a bunch of people to buy into that, I think you'll have probably 50% of your problems with this fire department solved. That's my opinion.
It sounds easier said than done, but I take your point. What's your name?
So I'm Zach Hahn. I'm a student at Landmark College and firefighter here. I had a question about the committee. Is the committee itself for hiring separate than a job description committee, or is it necessary to take a step back further and focus on a committee just particularly for the job description?
Yeah, so originally, 2 weeks ago, we were gonna make it be one committee that did job description and interview process. There was some pushback on that, so we made it just the interview committee. That's what's standing before us right now. At this point, I'm not sure what we're doing. It sounds to me like the original process that we came up with here may not be the best process going forward, so we may not be standing up any kind of committee tonight. Hopefully we'll come to some kind of agreement amongst the 5 of us what the next step is before we leave, so that we can keep going with the momentum here. And yeah, I know you have to leave. Peg has to leave soon, so hopefully we can come up with that pretty soon. But I guess it's fluid. Welcome suggestions. Jeanette.
So I just want to clarify what I said before, is that I don't necessarily have any disagreement with the leadership that's in the fire department now. I think Brian is right. People just need to get over it and do the job and get here. But I would say that if you look at the Triton report, the very first thing that they said was that you need to have a community discussion. It is not the select board's role to decide what the fire department is going to be. You need to have, that was their first suggestion, have a community discussion. And I think that that's really important. And a lot of it depends on how long Evan wants to remain as interim. I would say if he wants to remain as interim during that period of community discussion, then so be it. If he decides he doesn't want to, then you're gonna have to find somebody else to be interim. And I would say that whoever is interim should not be interested in the job permanently. That oftentimes when you have an interim, a person serving in an interim position, they will try to mold the future and the job to what they feel is important. So I think that whatever you do, you don't want to get an outside interim who wants to have the job permanently. But I think the very first thing you need to do is have the community discussion. You can't write a job description until you know whether you have a part-time or a full-time, or is the person going to be full-time and have those other duties that the chief had? He had, I think, 5 different jobs in there. Are some of those going to be incorporated? You haven't made that decision yet, and that's the larger community that needs to make that, along with the fire department. So.
I agree with Jeanette about the community engagement in this, but I think that if we were to move in the direction of creating a fire department planning committee, that would be part of what they would do. That would be one of the things we would task them with,
Yeah.
is to, engage the community in a discussion about that. But I think that we need a group of people to, and then also draft the job descriptions after that. That's like a step 6 after, you have your community meeting as step 2, and then you got some things to work out before you get to your job description. But that committee seems like they should be able to do all that entire process. And it has to be done knowing how. We just need to know where our interim chief stands, whether, I don't think that should change the way we do this process, but it will.
Well, we should have a plan for succession.
Have a plan for what to do.
Okay.
So that would be my proposal, is to stand up a fire department planning committee.
Okay. What's the feeling of the rest of the board on that versus going ahead with our original agenda items?
I think a planning committee makes a lot more sense than a hiring committee right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
And I would just say that community engagement is one thing we've talked about. I think a review of the Triton report and what it has to, how it can inform the planning, as well as hopefully at the end of their tenure, designing job descriptions.
Would they then morph into the hiring committee?
Not
or would they-
necessarily. I
That
think
would
they're
be the
two
end of
different
their-
things.
That would be the end
yeah.
of their job?
I think they're two different things.
Okay. So who wants to work on that charge?
I have a question, please. So how long is this stand-up committee? You gonna put a time frame on this?
On the planning committee?
Yes.
I think we need to get together with Evan offline to see how long we have. But
I actually don't think that's what we need to do. I think.
do you have a time
I
frame?
mean, I think we should create a time, and then we have to dovetail that with what Evan's doing. But I don't think I don't think this process should be driven by that. That has kind of become clear to me here, that the process should not be driven by.
No, but I guess I'm looking for an end, we would want an end date.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 months. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
6 months.
Team, what do you think? 6 months?
Okay, I still haven't gotten who's writing this charge. Fletcher.
6 months to complete the work, or 6 months to get the committee together?
6 months to complete the work.
not funny.
It isn't funny, that has happened before.
Yeah.
So no, if we could come up with a charge in the next, not 2 weeks, but say not next meeting, but the meeting after that, regular scheduled
And
meeting.
how are we gonna, I assume some of us are gonna be on the committee, but I also think there's a whole lot of talent sitting right in front of us.
I think we would go through the same. We do have an appointment procedure. So we would follow that process, which is not, we've followed parts of it, but not all of it in this kind of rushed
Yeah.
position. So we would follow that procedure to stand it up. So you're gonna write it? First, we need a charge.
Uh-huh.
I'll help you do it.
Okay,
Okay.
that's a deal.
All right.
And anybody else we can recruit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely seek input from other people, but basically we just need a point person to write it.
You're the point person. I'm the helper.
Yes. Okay. All right. Nancy.
Nancy Olson, the job description that you have, who wrote it?
Don't know.
So there was 13 of us in the room last night. Most of them were fire personnel,
Okay.
past chiefs. Fletcher was in that room, I was in that room. So I mean, I thought we did some good work last night.
I did too.
Right, and this would, I assume, go to this, would be very useful to to this planning committee, planning group, fire department planning group. It's just a little premature, that's all. And until we have the plan.
Can I make another comment? Because this is just, please. So I'm actually concerned right now because, in May, we're gonna lose like 6 folks. And we are in crisis. We're gonna be more in crisis. And my concern is like the 2,700 plus people that we have to make sure we have coverage. And that's a concern of mine right now.
We're missing
And
6 people from the fire department or?
Landmark students.
yeah, the
Oh,
students are leaving.
So what do you, I'm
I'm not-
concerned too, but do you think that doing this quicker, being less thoughtful, less,
Well, I think we have
is gonna
to
be
be,
helpful?
we have to pay attention to what's going on and the changes that are happening. And I'm not sure, doing this process is,
I'm not sure that doing it any faster or appointing a hiring committee tonight is gonna help with recruiting. So I think that's a separate conversation. That's an ongoing problem, and maybe that's a different subject to be had with Evan and the other leadership.
Right.
Like I don't know, put out a candy drive. I don't, give people an incentive. I have no idea how to recruit people, but it does sound like that's an issue, but it's not gonna be solved by us moving quicker. I don't think. Len?
This is just a thought, and I think Evan would be open to it, because I know Evan, and I agree with what Jeanette said, as far as getting an interim chief, and I think there's people out there that you're gonna have to pay them, and you should pay that gentleman too. But I think you could have somebody come in and work with Evan as an interim chief, mentor him, and help him grow the department. I think that's a good first start. It gets people in here, it helps him. He's got somebody with him that's helping him develop a vision and a plan, and of course he's got to include his people. But I think overall that would be a first huge step to help move the department forward. Initially, I think everything else you're saying, and Jeanette's right, you're not gonna want that person typically that person doesn't stay on afterwards. He's here to help and mentor Evan. And I think that would be a first huge step for you folks to do.
Okay, thanks. Lance?
I'm Zach.
Zach, sorry.
So,
Bad with names, obviously.
it's all right. A few weeks ago, Karen was here at the department with Fletcher and Peg, and there was this recruitment issue brought up as well. I think something that could be very well utilized and something that could take maybe a week, 2 weeks tops, is moving our application for the fire department to the town website. At the moment, there is no application online at all. They have to come directly to the department. If that is advertised properly, and if it's put online, it makes the fire department more accessible and easier for public, not just in Putney, but surrounding towns as well.
That's a very good suggestion.
So he's
Rachel,
gonna
you hear
work,
that?
yeah, he's gonna work with Rachel.
If that's okay with,
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
go for it. More publicity is, I didn't realize it wasn't on the website. That's a really good point. Brian?
Yeah, so that's a good idea. The only trouble that I can see, well, I don't really see any trouble with that, but in the short term of that, new recruitment is great, but there's a time period there where you have to get them trained. So as far as the next 6 months, new recruitment is gonna be fairly limited on what they contribute to the department, which is, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do it, because it's anybody that wants to come, you should let them come if they wanna help. One thing I think that should happen is you put everybody that is is on the roster in a room, and there might be some tempers, and there might be some, you know, arguing back and forth, but, you know, maybe when you come out at the end of it, you might gain 4 or 5 people that, you know, they found some common ground and they decide to show up, and they're already trained, so.
Well, that sounds like a mediated discussion with maybe a trained mediator for real. But it's not a bad suggestion. Karen?
That has been brought up, and I'm gonna, with Brian's comment,
Yeah.
we do have people that are not showing up, and that's an internal thing, and they need to work through that, because those are the people that I wanna see back in this department. Okay? And when anybody feels like they're an outsider when they go to a fire, there's a problem, there's a concern. I have talked to people too, all right? These people need to trust and respect one another, and it's an internal, and it just needs to go away.
Yeah,
And
but I
then-
mean, obviously things don't go away unless you work them out, so
And it needs to be worked
serious.
out.
Please,
It's
if
just
there's
like,
some kind of mediation session that we can accommodate for a group of people, I think that's an excellent idea.
I think most of the problems are actually pretty small. It's just, they festered for so long that you just need to get the people together and hash it out. And I think the majority of it could be over with.
Yep.
Go to mediate section.
Sure.
This is just a quick response to Karen's point, and I feel like we're sort of drifting from the weeds to like the really 50,000-foot view, and then we are sort of going back into the weeds. I think that with respect to what's happening in May, if there's a concern about losing valuable personnel, and just for the record, the landmark students that have been on the department the last, I don't know, however long it's been, have been enormously effective in the town. And it's been said before, but I just want to say it again, and it is going to be a loss. That I think, again, it's kind of a tactical issue. So if we're losing X amount of resources at X date, I would suggest that, not sound like a broken record, we have an interim chief. So let that be a conversation that happens with Evan. Put it to Evan, how do you feel about what's happening in May? Are we going to be well enough equipped to respond? We had 17 calls in the last 8 days. Did we get to them? Are we getting to them? If we lose these resources, is it going to threaten our ability to respond to those same 17 calls? And if the answer is yes, then I think the question should start here. Just like, well, what do you propose we do? And, you know, going back to Len's point, I mean, maybe Evan's going to say we need to shut the department down for 3 months or 6 months. He might say that. I'm not, but the conversation should happen that way. And then at least you're bringing forward a recommendation that has the insight of the guy that's currently sitting in the interim position, and then you can go from there. And if it's going to be another crisis situation, then we call it out and we deal with it, just like we dealt with the last one.
right.
I mean, that seems to me to be the process.
Well, I think it's good that we're bringing it up now, so it's not gonna be, hopefully it won't be a crisis. And clearly all we have to do is make sure that all the landmark students stay in Putney. Okay, so I think we might be winding down here because we're not doing what we originally said we were doing. We're doing something else. I don't think we need to act on that. Does anybody
Well,
else?
we need to act, but we don't need to vote.
We don't need to vote on it. Are there any other suggestions or comments on the board? Are there any other final comments in the room?
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thanks for showing up.
Okay, then I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, and our next meeting date is April 3rd, 2024. That's a regularly scheduled meeting. We don't have any meetings before then, right? We have one after that. This is, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's on Town Hall and at Zoom at 5:30. If I didn't say that already. Thank you,
Third and the
everyone.
fourth.